The term gentrification refers to processes by which higher income or higher status people relocate to or invest in low-income urban neighborhoods. These neighborhoods have historically been disinvested by both the public and private sector. And so as higher income people move to these areas, it's typically to capitalize on the low property values. In doing so, they inflate property values, displace low-income people, and fundamentally alter the culture and character of the neighborhood. Tom Slater describes gentrification, he's an urban geographer, he describes gentrification as the spatial expression of economic inequality, or the way in which inequality plays out in our neighborhoods and communities. I think another point we have to remember is that gentrification is further confounded by the legacy of racial inequality in America. The neighborhoods that are gentrifying across the country are disproportionately occupied by Black and brown people. Thus, Black and brown people are disproportionately being displaced. And typically, they're being displaced by the influx of white people. This dynamic, you can imagine, causes all sorts of tensions.
You just can't come in Bogart. I'm for democracy and let everybody live, but you gotta have some respect. You can't come in where people have a culture that's been laid down for generations, and you come and now she gotta change because you're here? Get the out of here. You can't do that.
So when we put gentrification into its appropriate context, and understand that it's a manifestation of inequality, and it demands that we start thinking about preventative strategies and policies that can ameliorate gentrification.
People want to live in Clinton Hill. The people who live on the Lower East Side, they moved to Williamsburg, they came before Williamsburg now because of mother hipsters. And now, and then what they call Bushwick now, West. What's the word?
West, East Williamsburg.
Displacement is central to the experience of gentrification. Some refer to it as social cleansing. There has to be a better way to accomplish urban development than to displace the very people who are building the neighborhoods we now deem desirable.
real estate guys come around and open a suitcase with a bunch of money, they're going to sell it. And many of these people you're talking about are elderly. And if they get the money, money was a lot further down south. Black people by droves in New York City is called reverse migration. They're moving to Atlanta, they're moving to North Carolina, they got a house, they got a lawn, they got a backyard, they less taxes. And so, I mean, New York City is a hard place. And so if you worked all your life and you're retired, they're selling their houses. And I don't blame them.
Without possessions or something? Because NAMA, the first part of it, there's two syllables. You know, it's like NAMA means without. It doesn't have. See?
Urban gentrifiers are often spoken about as though they are pioneers, settling the urban frontier. This story ignores the people who were there already. People like Vicky, who have suffered through decades of disinvestment, through redlining, blockbusting, deindustrialization, budget cuts, and outright neglect.
I take you back in your history. After the American Indian hostiles had been subdued and forcibly confined to Indian reservations, it took approximately 30 years, one generation, for us to adjust and become economically viable. Contrary to what the anthropologists say and what we even ourselves are taught as Indian people. However, allotments were made smaller, our remaining lands were open to homesteading, and we were forced into reducing our livestock. Nevertheless, we made the adjustment again in less than half the aforementioned time, 15 years, to become economically self-sufficient again. But once again, the American Indian was forced into reducing our livestock. The boss farmer concept was instituted. We were told what, when, where, how much, and how little we could grow. This applied to agriculture and our livestock. Again, we recovered in a time span of approximately 15 years. We were so successful in our third recovery that the American Indians enjoyed the finest of economic times, while the rest of the industrialized world was wallowing in the Great Depression. It was then that President Roosevelt introduced the Howard Wheeler Act, better known as the Indian Reorganization Act, the IRA, which institutionalized the so-called tribal governments, which are not one of our institutions, and it is still foreign to us this very day. We have yet to recover. 45 years later, the IRA, Indian tribal governments, on their own initiative, began renewed efforts at reestablishing their sovereignty focused on the oldest profession of American Indians. That's gambling. Bingo and other gaming operations has been, without exception, a proven initial success. Failure through mismanagement, politics, or litigation has been less than 15%, showing a better than 85% success rate. The new Indian-sponsored gaming industry on reservations dwarfed success ratios of any and all other non-Indian industries in America. Gaming operations have proven to benefit the revenue gathering of all governments, be they county, state, or Indian reservation. With regulation of bingo and gaming by the Congress, we are experiencing repetition of history. One shouldn't remedy success. The results? The United States government, through Congress, once again intervenes to regulate a proven success in violation of all basic and fundamental rules of economics and totally contrary to all laws of capitalism. American Indians are human beings. Indian front contractors are supposed to be citizens of the United States of America. To proceed to build shoddy, we fought in your wars in other countries, schools, roads, and our Navajo Nation code talkers serve and save this nation when there is a failure. And we have the inalienable right to joint venture contracting with whom we choose, as long as we do not harm nor commit fraud within the BIA and now the tribal governments.
Where we are fighting for land trust. We have already had people come in and put in buildings that don't benefit us on all corners, but we are standing firm that the moratorium is still in place and this is still our neighborhood and we want affordable housing. I have children and I want to see my children be able to afford to buy a house in my community where they grew up. They have a right to do that.
kuda. Wela kuda. Sampa.
You can't do it anymore. And so if New York City is not affordable, then the great art that we have is not going to be here. Because people can't afford it.
A boy last week who was 16 in San Francisco told me on television. Thank God we got him to talk. Maybe somebody will start to listen. He said, I got no country, I've got no flag. Now he's only 16 years old. And I couldn't say you do. I don't have any evidence to prove that he does. They were tearing down his house because San Francisco is engaging, as most northern cities now are engaged, in something called urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact. Now we're talking about human beings. There's not such a thing as a monolithic wall or some abstraction called the Negro problem. These are Negro boys and girls who at 16 and 17 don't believe the country means anything that it says and don't feel they have any place here on the basis of the performance of the entire country.
But now, Jim...
No, am I exaggerating?
No, I certainly could not say that you're exaggerating.
Well, I could have.